Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. Today is a good day. Not only is it my 50th video, but today we received the news that the Division 3 could be in development. And it's the much needed boost that I needed to my enthusiasm, because making these videos is hard. It takes a lot of time. I could punch out bullshit build videos every other day, but that's not why people watch this channel, and I thank you very much for doing so. You watch this channel to see the stuff that spreadsheets and your own testing doesn't tell you. Today is no different. Let's go. And we pick up where we left off in the last episode with a very close run battle between Perfect Focus and the Striker's Chest for the Damage Supremacy King. But we still have, on the Perfect Focus build, a headshot damage scope. We need to work out how much that's going to add to the Perfect Focus combo to work out whether or not it achieves Damage Meta King. Now, the breakdown of those two builds looks like this, but before we can get into how much the headshot scope adds, there's a couple of things that we need to go through. So first of all, there was a little bit of confusion about crit chance, crit damage from the last one, so I'll just quickly explain that because it's necessary to understand headshots, and so it's perfect timing. I'm just going to take a step back, remove the Coyote's mask just to simplify things, and we're going back to this build here. Now this build produces on average from a mag 31 million in damage, just over 31 million. Now that is based on the average crit hit damage output. Now there is a lot of variance in that, but this is the average over time, 85%, and that's made up of 59% crit chance and 144% crit damage, working out to be 84.96 on average. But what actually occurs is that you have non-crits and crits that occur in accordance with RNG. And there can be quite a difference. If we do the calculations for a 100% non-crit magazine, RNG hates you, and you will now reduce your total magazine damage output to 16.7 million. If RNGesus shines his favourable light on you on that day and you get 100% crit hits, you're now adding 144% crit damage to those to your entire magazine, and that results in 40.9 million in magazine damage output. But that doesn't occur. It occurs over time in line with your crit hit chance percentage. In this case, 59% crits and 41% non-crits. So we have our all non-crit magazine at 16.7 million. That occurs 41% of the time. 6.8 million is what it adds to the magazine on average. All crits is 40.9 million, and that adds at 59% occurrence rate 24 million to your magazine for a total on average of 31 million. So now that we've established that, it's time to get on to today's real topic. Headshots. You have been telling yourself a lie. And I want to not only show you, but prove it to you that this game is designed in a way, and your brain is designed in a way, that it has been lying to you. So we're going to go back to our Striker's Chest. Headshots go into this bucket. Whether we like it or not, it goes into the crit hit bucket. So in where we could average in the past for our other results, we can't average now, because a critical hit headshot is going to suffer diminished returns from 144% crit damage, whereas a non-crit headshot suffers no diminishing returns. And if we look at the diminishing returns graph, the 75% headshot damage suffers no diminished returns on a non-crit, but on a critical hit, it suffers all the way down to 41% of its original value, only yielding 30.75% damage output. So we go back to 100% non-crits versus 100% crits, and we can add in our values for headshot damage. So for a non-crit, that results in a magazine damage of 29 million, and for critical headshots, that's a magazine damage of 53.5 million. The non-crit headshot will occur 41% of the time if we're doing all headshots, and the critical headshot will occur 59% of the time, meaning that if we were at 100% headshots, 43.6 million versus 0% headshots being 31 million. So our 75% headshot damage because of diminished returns has yielded a 40% return. The lie that you have been telling yourself is that that 40% return is worth it and that you should go for headshots. But at 43 million versus 31 million, what that means is that you require 71.2% the accuracy that you do going for a body shot. If you hit 100% body shots, you need to hit 71.2% accuracy on your headshots just to make going for that headshot worth it. The reason that you believe this is twofold. The first one is a noodle baking idea similar to the Monty Hall problem. It burns my brain as well, but all that you need to know is that a bullet with a higher damage value is more likely to kill the enemy. It is more likely to deal the killing blow, and it will do that at a greater rate than what it does its occurrence. Even though you might have 50% crit chance on your build, a critical hit will kill the enemy more often than what a non-crit will. That's all you need to understand. Now, this does have impacts on most effective build concepts, so I will probably explain this in a future episode. But for now, that's it. And just know that this applies even more to headshots because they are the largest bullet damage types that we create. The second part is that your brain is rewarded by the game for dealing a headshot kill. And we are all hopelessly addicted to the dopamine hit of that juicy squelch. But we're not as good as we think we are, and it's simple maths. The body of a target is 9 times the area of the head, not to mention that when a target dips and ducks, it's moving its head almost twice as much. Now you can continue to tell yourself this lie where you believe that on average you are doing more damage by going for headshots, just like I did, but I'm now going to show you something that shattered all of those dreams. This is the accuracy over distance chart that I have produced for all the different assault rifles. And what you can see here is that around about the 45 meter mark, you reach this massive drop off. And what I'm calling this is the rounds on target cliff. There comes a point where every single assault rifle takes a massive dive as far as their ability to land rounds on target is concerned. The higher the stability and the accuracy, the vertical trajectory path, because this is accuracy on a full target over distance. All of those factors combined lead to pushing that drop-off point further out. But there are some weapon characteristics that make it impossible for you at 50 meters to achieve your 71.2% accuracy. And you're like, well, how the hell does this relate to headshots? I've mentioned this before, but everything is scalable. A head at 5 meters is the equivalent of a target at 20. A head at 10 meters is equivalent to 35 meters, and a head at 15 meters is the equivalent of a target at 50 meters. And the smaller the target, the sooner that you arrive at your damage cliff, at the rounds on target cliff, and we get a new accuracy over distance chart that looks like this. 5 meters, every single weapon is capable of getting almost 100% rounds on target, no problems whatsoever. All of a sudden, at 10 meters, the chameleon is now struggling to get even 70% rounds on target. And when you reach the 15 meter mark, almost 50% of the weapons are now physically incapable of providing you the return that you need to make going for headshots worth it. And you still mightn't believe me. Now look, this accuracy graph isn't 100%. I based it on my ability to control this weapon, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of variance there. My ability to control the weapon allows me to get a tight grouping on with every single weapon type. But for Mars, for instance, this is how it worked out for me. And at 15 meters, we are right on the cusp of being unable to provide 70% returns by going for headshots. If I take all of the weapon profiles and I reduce them down to around about 75% of their original size, there is only this many weapons that can actually physically provide you the return that you need at 15 meters. I can take my personal ability bias out of this and prove it to you with the glory days. 100% stability. I'm going to remind you of that. 100% stability, but it sits right on the cusp of being able to provide you with the returns that you need at 15 meters. And here it is in the firing range. So I've got my test build. There's no weapon handling on the build. I haven't got any attachments other than the extended magazine on the Glory Days 100% stability. And I'm just going to get an average for the body shots only. So I'm going to do this a number of times just to remove the crit variance, which can be quite a lot. So if I run this enough times, we'll get a good average. So we're looking at around about 3.35 million for the DPS. So what I need to be able to do is simply hit headshots, and that should provide me with roughly a 40% return. 12% lower damage on the first run. 3.6, which means that next magazine produced 4.2 million DPS. And it's this variance that assists in the lie. You remember when the target disappeared in a zip, and forget the times that the target was 20% slower. But as I said, right on the absolute cusp of being physically able to produce the returns that are needed. Now, because this was about finding what the damage meta is, I knew that going for headshots outside of 15 meters is not going to be the meta. But the headshot scope offered by the Perfect Focus build definitely has more damage. There's an extra 30% headshot damage there. What I needed to know was how much it was going to add in the face-off for the damage meta. So I did the same test again and found that although there's no improvement to the accuracy, you're just looking at the target class, it doesn't change the weapon characteristics whatsoever. Despite 105% extra headshot damage, I could only yield about 25% extra DPS. And that was even with 2 crit chance mods missing from the weapon, so there was less diminished returns than what there normally would be. So I took the extra 20 to 25% damage over to the other side to see what it would look like at ranges between 15 and 20 meters, the average engagement distance, and I can confirm, going for headshots outside of 10 meters is definitely not the meta. For the glory days, it's accuracy of the weapon, the attribute accuracy that's the issue. For the FAMAS, it tends to be the stability and its buck that is the issue. The accuracy of the FAMAS is actually very, very good, but I introduced overshoot when it comes to killing a dead enemy, essentially putting too many rounds into an enemy, and how a faster firing weapon does that at a greater rate because it's firing more rounds per second. But that's exactly the case when it comes to when your reticle is off target. It will miss more shots. It will waste more of its total magazine damage outside of the target than what it does coming back onto the target. And that's actually a big issue because your burst bubble, and a lot of people confuse my burst bubble as being just the total mag damage. It's not. It is the total magazine damage reduced by real world factors, and the largest of those is your accuracy. Now this was actually my first 2 runs or attempts at getting a better score with headshots than body shots with the FAMAS. As in this case with the FAMAS, me attempting to go for headshots resulted in this enemy falling outside of my burst bubble, and that would have required a reload in order to kill that enemy. A dangerous situation, and it most definitely reduced my damage per second. Now, this becomes a more important factor as we talk about meta in other regards, because there is the value of success. In this case, I wasn't able to achieve even equilibrium with body shots only very often at all. But when it comes to when I've failed, the cost of failure far exceeds the value of the times where I achieve success. And that's an important principle in that there is a value equation, which is the value of success minus the cost of failure. Now in the case of this build, with 100% body shots, it took roughly 40 bullets fired in order to kill that enemy, which is a TTK of 2.66 seconds. The value of success with headshots is that I land 100% of those headshots, and it now takes me 29 bullets fired in order to kill that enemy, meaning my TTK is 1.93 seconds. So the value of success is roughly 0.7 of a second. And your brain is hardwired to remember these successes, where you took massive chunks out of the enemy. Equilibrium, as I said before, is achieved somewhere around about the 70 to 75% mark. If I average 75% headshots, then it now takes me 39 bullets fired, and again, equilibrium, so we're at 2.6 seconds for our TTK. Your brain will probably remember this as being a success rather than just equilibrium. Because everything's happening at 15 rounds a second, you don't notice those 11 bullets that actually miss the target. Now the cost of failure, if my accuracy drops down to 50%, it now takes me 58 bullets fired in order to kill that enemy. And because 58 bullets exceeds the number in my magazine, the TTK is now 6 seconds. That's the difference between total mag damage and burst bubble. Value of success versus the cost of failure, and this is an important principle when it comes to other aspects of meta, which we'll explore later. So we are falsely led to believe that we achieve more than what we actually achieve because the larger bullet value kills enemies more often than other bullet values. And then when that occurs, our brain is rewarded to reinforce that idea by the juicy squelch that the game provides as a jackpot noise. But we are hitting headshots far less than we actually realize, and in general gameplay, it's probably less than 10%. And as far as the most effective tactics go, knowing whether or not your weapon is in fact capable of producing the results that you desire is the first part. The second part is to get yourself into the firing range and work out what that balancing point is, knowing that you are doing that on an absolute stationary target. In the case of the FAMAS, the best results, because it is stability that's actually holding it back, is to aim for center of scene mass and allow the natural bounce of the weapon to take you up to the head occasionally, getting what I call incidental headshots. But with 100% certainty, going for headshots, putting your cursor directly over the enemy's head at greater than where your damage cliff is absolutely going to produce less damage per second. But this doesn't only apply to heads. We've also got weak points, which can provide you a much greater than 35% return on your time to kill by taking a weak point instead. That same damage cliff exists for targeting these small areas as well. Specific areas on tanks and shield bearers. The list goes on of where rounds on target and a weapon's ability, or your gear set's ability to be able to provide you with rounds on target, is a major multiplier. So realistically, there is a 35% damage multiplier that is going untapped right now, and there are ways to take advantage of it by making adjustments to your build that rectify your weapon deficiencies that are stopping you from achieving those results. Alternatively, you can build in a way that allows you to close the distance and push your damage cliff past where your average engagements are going to be, therefore allowing you to access that 30 to 40% damage multiplier much more regularly. But that's something that we'll explore later. Right now, we are looking at damage and damage only. Okay, we're back to our damage meta face-off, because now we can include headshots. The Striker's Chest version only has 75% headshot damage, whereas the Pristine Example has taken a headshot damage scope, pushing that up to 105%. So let's see what incidental headshots with 105% headshot damage does to our results. Currently, Striker's Chest slightly in the lead. Let's see what happens. So now we have to include our Coyotes into the mix, which is painful, but it needs to be done. So we're now averaging 89.5% crit hit damage. Now, outside of our incidental headshots, which we are going to say is 10% of the time, because we're going for the most effective tactics available, not going for headshots all the time. We're going for the most effective tactics, which is incidental headshots, which is going to result in about 10% of them landing for you. So this average non-crits will occur 90% of the time. We then have our non-crit headshots, and that results in a full 75% headshot damage being added and a total mag damage of 29.3 million. And then we have crit headshots, now receiving the diminished returns from adding to a critical hit, which with Coyote's Mask is averaging 164.6% crit hit damage. When you add in the Coyote's buffs, the 47-153 build is now averaging 164.6% crit hit damage. But that results in a 56.9 million mag. Now we need to divide our 10% headshots by the number of crits. We have crit non-crit average at 31.78 million occurring 90% of the time, providing 28.6 million to our mag. Our non-crit headshot, 29.348 million, and the average crit chance with the Coyote's buff takes that to 45.4% of the time, which is 1.3 million added to the build, and then our crit headshot damage at 56.9 million for the mag occurs 54.6% of the time out of our 10%, gives us 3.1 million added, and that gives us a new total magazine damage for the striker's chest, including incidental headshots, of just over 33 million. Let's check out the pristine example perfect focus. So pristine example perfect focus with Coyotes, averaging 73.4% crit hit damage and an average of 31 million provided from crits and non-crits, and that'll be 90% of the time. We have a 44-129 being the most optimal. Now that 30% headshot damage scope sounds like it should add a lot of value, but you have to remember that it is receiving diminished returns. On a non-crit, there's already 75% headshot damage already on the build, so that 30% that we're adding is reduced by 57.1%, providing 17.13% output to what our headshot would have already. And then on a crit headshot, we are now pushing all the way out at 215% odd damage, where that 30% is now being added at, meaning it's taking 68.3% hit to its damage output, taking it all the way down to 9.51% added. So that's quite a hit to the value of that headshot scope in the first place. So we have our crit non-crit average, just over 31 million, occurring 90% of the time. We have our non-crit 105% headshot damage, resulting in a 36.6 million mag. And we have our 105% headshot damage being added to an average of 140.6 crit hit damage using the Coyote's buffs, resulting, when all of those multipliers are fleshed out, a 61.8 million magazine if we were to do nothing but critical headshots. But that's not the case. Non-crit crit average 31 million 90% of the time, provides 27.9 million to the magazine. A non-crit headshot 36.6 million occurs 47.4% of the time of the 10% of the time that we're doing our headshots, giving us 1.7 million added to the mag. A critical headshot 61.8 million 10% of the time by 52.6% crit chance, which is the average with the Coyote's buffs, adds 3.25 million to our magazine for a total of 32.9 million. So in the damage meta face-off, it is so close. So close. So this is at 10% incidental headshots. And it would take you about 12 to 13% incidental headshots for that headshot scope to edge the perfect focus build in front. Now, despite strikers and gunner specialization adding over 20% weapon handling to both of these builds, in Legendary, and let's face it, that's the only place that a perfect focus build is viable, pushing up a few percent is actually a lot harder than you realise. A lot of targets that don't take headshot damage or don't even have heads at all, and there are targets that it is less optimal to go for headshots than it is something else. This is way too close for me to call. Way too close. It's going to come down to weapons, I think. Hang on. We also have the option of putting a headshot scope onto the striker's build. Let's see what happens there. So in order to put that headshot scope on, we have to lose 5% crit chance from our build. Now that takes us from 47,153 down to 42,153. But we can rejig the build to provide a better result on paper to be a 48,141 build. We are now averaging 83.95% crit hit damage. Crits, non-crits, 84% average, 83.95. Gives us a mag damage of 30.85 at 90% occurrence rate. Our 105% headshot damage gives us a mag of 34.3 million. And our crit headshot gives us a mag of 59.97 million. Crit, non-crit average, 30.8, 90%, 27.7 provided to the magazine. Non-crit headshot, 34.3 million. We are now down to 44.7% of the time being a non-crit. And that is 1.5 million added to the magazine. A crit headshot at 59.9 million. Our crit chance is averaging 55.3% of the time now for a 5.53% average out of our 10% incidental headshots. 3.3 million added to our magazine for a total of 32.625 million. Less than what we were doing without the headshot scope. So we stick. The meta for the Strikers build is to keep the crit chance mod in place of the headshot damage scope. The perfect focused build has no choice but to take the 8x scope or greater, and it produces almost the same. Almost the same. It's less than 1% difference. Less than 1% difference. But in order to access that headshot scope, it needs certain weapon types. Is it going to be an advantage or a disadvantage? Because those weapons that can't access a headshot scope have locked talents. So it is definitely going to come down to weapon selection. And so that's where we've got to go next. We're going to have to take a deep dive into each of the damage weapon talents to see which one produces the most damage. At this point in time, without talents included, it is the St. Elmo's that rules the roost when it comes to damage output for both single target and multiple target damage per second. But is it enough of a lead to hold off the damage talents that the other weapons can access? Whew. We got some work to do. If you like this video, then hit the like button. If you want to see the deep dives into the damage weapon talents first, then hit the subscribe button. But otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Fog out.